Hello, and welcome to the Knit and Grace podcast. This is episode 16. Hello, and welcome back if you are a returning viewer. If you are new here, my name is Mia, and I am the maker behind Knit and Grace. And on this channel, we get up to tons of fiber arts things. So primarily knitting. I am a fledgling spinner, so maybe one day we will start showing some spinning content on here. And then I do occasionally feature some sewing content, which primarily has dedicated episodes separate to my regular podcast episodes for those. But yeah, if this all sounds like something that you would be interested in, welcome, and thank you for clicking on this video today. So today I bring you the regular podcast episode. So this is the monthly podcast episode in a traditional knitting podcast style. So we're going to talk about everything that I've been working on, what I'm currently working on, and what I plan on working on in the next month or so. And yeah, and at the end I have some numbers to update you on for my 2023 stash down numbers, or I guess it was somewhat of a stash down. And also at the very end of today's podcast, I'm going to talk about the new-ish format of the podcast episodes going forward for the rest of the year. So we can go ahead and jump right in with what I am wearing today. And today I am wearing my Stick Season sweater by Rebecca Clow of the Creya Bea podcast. And of course, as always, if I have a finished object picture, I'll insert that here for you all to see. And I test knit this for Rebecca back in the fall before it was released. I believe it was released around the time of Rhinebeck, so shortly after Rhinebeck, I think like the first week of November or so. And I used Primrose Yarn Co. Rowan DK, which is a blend of superwash and non-superwash 100% American wool that's milled somewhat nearby to me in Pennsylvania. And yeah, I will, like with everything else, include all of my Ravelry project pages below, and I'll also link you to the episode where I talk in detail about this project if you want to know the details of how I made this sweater. So the first finished object that I have to share with you all is an interesting one. It's not 100% finished because there is one more step that I need to do. However, it's going to be a little bit of time before I do that. And it is a swatch bag. And so this is completely inspired by Marlene of Marlene Knits, and after watching her episode when she knit a swatch bag for herself, I was just super inspired and looking at my pile of swatches, and one night I just, sort of laid everything out and seamed everything together, and this is the final result. I did not follow a pattern. I kind of just did my own thing, although there is an official swatch bag pattern out there that I will link to below. And yeah, I absolutely love how this turned out. This is one side, and so some of these swatches are for projects that I've already done or I haven't done yet. Some of them are actually swatches that I've submitted for sample knitting opportunities, which I think is like this one over here. This is a swatch for the first cardigan. This is a swatch that I haven't knit yet, but I do plan on knitting. This was my second swatch for the first cardigan. You needed to have a stockinette and a fisherman's rib swatch. This one down here is the swatch for my Ava pullover, and it wraps around to the front. This is my swatch for my Parnell. This was a swatch test, as which this one. And then, what was this one? This was, I think this was a swatch for my Caroline shawl. And the nice thing about my camera is that you all can see me, but it's really dark in my room right now, so I can barely see what I'm looking at. But what to say about this one? So I seamed all of my swatches together, and then I picked up along the tops, so 2 separate pieces, and knit back and forth, I believe for about 3 inches, and then I folded it over and knit it down to the pickup edge to form a casing. So this is where the drawstring will go through. And then for the bottom, I picked up along the bottom, and then I kind of started decreasing, kind of like how you would for a hat, so that it's, you know, flat. And so ultimately what I still need to do is I still need to sew the lining and sew it in. So when everything is said and done, it'll look like that. So it'll have like a round bottom, and it'll be a drawstring and all of that. But if you are new here, you may not know, my husband and I are going to be moving within the next couple of weeks. So my sewing machines are boxed up already and ready for the move and all of that. So the lining for this will have to wait just for a little bit of time. So I do have a Ravelry project page for it. Currently up, however, I don't have pictures yet or any additional information as to you know, making the lining and all of that. So I plan on updating that once, you know, that kind of second part of the bag is finished. But again, you know, it's all kind of multiple different swatches. And then I used some yarn that I had in stash, which was a Big Twist Spice, which is kind of like a fuzzy acrylic yarn that I had picked up at Joann a long time ago. And so I had a couple skeins of that in stash, and I ended up using 1 skein, and well, less than a skein, but it was maybe like half a skein, a little bit more than half a skein. And I used US 6 needles or 4mm needles to do the cord tube as well as the bottom. So I will detail out my instructions on how I did it and all of that, and update it in my Ravelry project notes, which will be linked down below. I can't promise when that's going to happen, but eventually it will happen. But in the meantime, if you do want to follow an actual pattern, I will also link the actual swatch bag pattern below. I don't recall who the designer of that pattern is, but I'll include all of that information as well. So the next project that I have to show you all is a pretty big project, and this is one that I kind of casted on pretty last minute and then finished it pretty quickly over the course of a few nights, and it is a baby blanket. It is actually 100% finished and blocked. I just need to weave in my 2 ends, so my starting end and my finishing end, but it is finished. And so this is called the ABC blanket, and so just so you all can see, it has essentially these 9 blocks, so 3 across and 3 down. You have the ABCs going diagonal, and then it has a few different shapes In terms of the finished object picture, I haven't taken that yet, and I don't know that I will take it in time for this video because I plan on editing this video tonight. But I will be updating the Ravelry project page before this video goes out, so you'll be able to follow the link below to find that out in terms of what that actually looks like. But this is a 100% free pattern. It is available through KnitPicks, and the designer is Jennifer Williams, and it was originally designed in I think one of the KnitPicks yarns, and this is my second time actually knitting this pattern. For this version, I chose to go with Lion Brand Pound of Love, which is a 100% acrylic yarn, because this is being gifted to new parents, and new parents that I'm not sure how they would sort of take care of things. And so I should preface this in saying all baby knits, I always, not all, most of the time, so I would say 90% of the time, I do knit in superwash yarn, because obviously if I'm gifting an item, I don't want to then impose special washing instructions on parents. But because these are new parents and I'm not sure, you know, how they would care for it, I wanted to make sure that I used a yarn that was both machine washable and dryable. And then also because I kind of cast this on last minute and I will be sending it out in the next couple weeks along with the registry gift, I just went to my local Joann's over the holiday when pretty much everything else was closed, and picked up a skein of Pound of Love. So I just used one full skein of Pound of Love, so it was nice. I just had to cast on and cast off, and then I just have the two ends to weave in. And I did use the recommended needles in the pattern, which is a US 7. And yeah, I mean, for gauge and all of that kind of stuff, for things like blankets and hats and shawls, I never do a gauge swatch. I kind of just go based on the recommended needle size, cast on, and, you know, go for it. So I had a very tiny bit of the yarn left, but it wasn't even like 20 grams left, so not anything that I could really do anything with. So I pretty much used up the entire skein, which was really great. And I think when I bought it, I had like a 40% coupon or something like that, so it was like $7, which, you know, you can't beat $7 for a baby blanket that'll be put in a care package for the new baby. So the next pattern that I finished was actually finished on Christmas Eve, and this is the Directional Pullover by Amy Scher. And this pattern is still in testing, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on this pattern in this episode, but I will plan on wearing this for my February episode, and I'll go into a little bit more detail as to my modifications and all of that, so that you all will be able to see the pattern as well as how it fits. So because it hasn't been released yet, I will not be sharing finished object pictures, although I did take those today, but this is one that you can look forward to. I have featured it a little bit on Instagram, so if you want to take some sneak peeks at what it's going to look like, you can do that there. But this is essentially a top-down drop shoulder pullover construction with a v-neck, and I am really happy about this one. I knit this one up in Nutiden in the color Gillingroa, and so this pattern, I believe, is written for a woolen spun yarn. Amy does like to design in woolen spun yarns, and it actually, the original pattern features color work, which I decided to omit. So yeah, that is my last garment that I finished for 2023. So if you caught my Everything I Knit in 2023 video, and if you haven't, I'll link that up above for you all. I talked about the fact that I was just about finished with one more garment, but it wasn't going to be finished in time for that video, and that's what this garment was. So a little bit more about that garment in next month's episode when I feature it once it has been released into the world. And my last finished object for the month, and this one is technically not finished completely. However, if you've been following me, you know that I'm working on a blanket using up Advent yarn. And so I have finished my 2023 Advent stripes for this blanket. So this is going to be its finished state until essentially January of next year, when I do my 2024 Advent. And it is the Woodland Ripple blanket. And so this is the second part of the blanket. This is what the blanket looks like, the whole thing. I have it folded up just because it's large. It is a lap blanket. And so for this blanket, I haven't taken any recent pictures of the new colorways. So again, you'll have to see my Ravelry project page once I update those, probably in a couple days. By the time this video goes up, my Ravelry project page will be updated, and so you can see what that kind of looks like. But in the meantime, I will insert a picture that I have of me as I was crocheting this up. So this is a crocheted blanket. It's a crocheted project, and essentially I'm crocheting it in the style of granny stripes. This is a free pattern, and all of my modifications are listed on my Ravelry project page. And of course, I'm not sure if I already mentioned this, but if Ravelry is not accessible to you, you can always send me a DM or leave me a comment, and I will provide you additional information that you might need. But yeah, this is the blanket. I finished the 24 stripes, and so I'm going to bring it up close. This year's stripes started here with this lavender color and then moved to this icy blue. And so these are all of the stripes for the 2023 Sweet Sparrow Advent. So I'm really happy with how this blanket is turning out. I'm hoping that one more year's worth of Advents will finish this blanket. So essentially, you know, the first part of the blanket was done with 2022 Advent. So my first 24 stripes, my second 24 stripes are 2023. And then I'm thinking I might just end it after 3 years, so 2024. We'll see how it's at that time, if I feel like it's long enough. It's essentially going to be a lap blanket, so it is pretty, you know, it's like a bit wider than my body, but I don't need it to be very long because it's going to be a lap blanket. And then obviously, if you know anything about Advent yarns, they are pretty expensive because they are hand dyed, and rightfully so. So I don't want to then end up with, like, I mean, it's already going to be like a $600 blanket, but I don't want to end up with even more in the blanket. And so I am currently holding it in this beautiful bag that Julie included in this year's Advent calendar. And so everything is in here, my crochet hook, my, you know, tags and all of that. And so this project will be put away until next year, or this year when you're seeing it, because I'm filming this ahead of time. But this will be put away until December of 2024, when I'll be able to pick it back up and hopefully once and for all finish the blanket. So we are now moving to the works in progress portion of today's podcast episode. And the first one that I have to show you is actually being housed in this basket, which if you all have been here for a while, you know is usually how I house my Nutiden projects. And this is a project that I'm working on in Nutiden. And this is the Artist Shawl by Natasha Hornby. And this is a pattern that I am knitting along with a few friends, and I'm really excited about. So we casted this on December 11th. Let's see if you can see that. On December 11th, and I have finished the first waffle section. And so I just have that little progress keeper by Hello Lavender, Reshma of Hello Lavender, showing me the right side of the project. But I've essentially finished the first waffle section, and then I have to start the first kind of color work section. And there are, I believe, 3 color work stripes, so where you have like color work and then waffle and then color work and then waffle before you get to the actual mosaic knitting part of the shawl. And yeah, I'm really excited about this. So again, knitting it with a few friends, and I'm knitting this one in Newtoden primarily, although I am throwing in one woolen twine thrive color, which is the color barley. And I'll insert a picture here of the colors that I'm using, but let me pull them up so I am giving you the correct information as to how I plan on using the colors. So my main color, which is color 1, I'm using Newtoden in the color Menning, and I'm holding that double. My contrast color 2, I will be using Newtoden in the color Vanessa, and I will likely be holding that one double as well. My color 3 is Barley, which is the woolen twine thrive, and that one is a much thicker unspun yarn, so I will be holding that one single. The contrast color 4 is Harden, which is a Newtoden color, and contrast color 5 is Infinitive, which is a Newtoden color. And so I really was, not only is this shawl stunning and I wanted to knit it, but I was also inspired to use up some of my stash yarn, as I have been using down some of my stash this year, and I thought that knitting it in Newtoden would be absolutely amazing. So that is what I'm doing for that. I am following the pattern so far exactly as written, using the needles recommended, so US 4 and a US 5, and I'm not, you know, I don't swatch for shawls or anything like that. I'm just going with the flow and getting going on the project. So now that I have a few things finished, I'm excited to be able to get back to that one and make a little bit more progress on it. So the next project that I have to show you all is another test knit, and I am holding it in this Pajalta Makes bag, which was gifted to me by a dear friend. And I am knitting this in Sonder yarn in Sunday Morning DK, which is 75% BFL, 25% Massam, in the color Toast and Honey, which is this stunning color. And if you have been here for a while, you know that this is totally my color. And this yarn has been gifted for this test knit, so thank you, Melissa of Sonder. Not that I think she watches my podcast, but yeah, so this yarn has been gifted for this this test knit, so I'm really excited to be able to finally use some of Melissa's beautiful yarn. And the pattern is the Citrine Pullover by Inez of Their Knit. And I'm just trying to figure out, no, this one. Here we go. So this is what it looks like. So it's not looking like much because I'm just started the beginning of the yoke section. There's another sort of set of increases to finish the yoke. So you can see you have a twisted rib top with this cabling detail, and then it has this faux half fisherman's rib stitch, which is really fun, or I guess like a faux rib stitch, if you will, which is really fun. Whenever Inez was sneak peeking this pattern on her Instagram page, I absolutely fell in love, and I knew that I needed to sign up for the test knit. And then when she announced the test knit, I did sign up for it, and then I was chosen, and so I am knitting it. Right now I'm using, let's see if we can turn that around, this stitch marker from Reshma, again, of Hello Lavender, and it is called Moon Bloom. And I thought it was just perfect given the season that we're in to use that one. And yeah, so again, this is the Citrine Pullover by Inez of Their Knit, and this is a test knit. So this one should be done by the end of this month because the test knit is due on February 4th, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to try to finish this one before we move on February 1st so that I can have everything done and out of the way and ready for when the pattern is released. But I'm really enjoying this pattern. The details on it is just absolutely stunning. Like you can see the cable detail refers all the way up from the neck all the way down into the raglan. So really excited. And so this is a top-down raglan construction. It does feature a compound raglan, so it's going to be you know, nice and well-fitting for people of larger busts especially, but you know, pretty much everyone, because compound raglan is always going to fit best. And I am really excited about that test knit. So the next project that I have to share with you all is technically a half-finished project, and they are the Yule socks by Heather of Olonic Knits. And this is what the first sock looks like out back here, so you can see the whole thing. And then I'll bring it up close so you can see the detail on this beautiful, beautiful sock. And so Heather was inspired by traditional Celtic Yule patterns when designing this sock, so it definitely gives you that festive feel without, you know, sort of being in your face festive. And this was my Christmas Eve cast on. So I casted these on Christmas Eve as part of Eula of Wool and Twine's Festive cast on. And I managed to finish the first sock in a couple of days, and then I'll be working on starting the second socks now. And so these socks are originally designed in einband, held with a silk mohair. And so I am using a silk mohair, although apparently my brown silk mohair is not in here and is still in my office. But I am using Drops Kid Silk for my silk mohair. So this is just the neutral. This is actually color 40, which is called light pink, I want to say, and it's just one that I had in my stash, so I wasn't going to use anything else. And then I think that, what color? I know it's called chocolate. The brown that I'm using is called chocolate, but I don't remember the number of that one. But again, my Ravelry project page will be linked below. And I'm holding this actually in my little bag that came in Eula of Wool and Twine's Festive box, because I'm using the Festive box yarn, which is her Ovis sock base, which is a new sock base that she introduced in 2023. And so these are the colors. And so this was part of her Festive box. And so the neutral color, or the natural color, is called Undyed Ecru, and the brown color is called Bearberry. And that is what that looks like. And so as part of the Festive box, you receive 200 gram skeins, so 100 grams of each color. You received this drawstring bag, which was hand sewn by Eula herself, and a mug by Studio Malls, so a hand thrown mug, and then a I forget what it's called, but it is kind of like the, I want to say the Japanese fabric wraps that had been naturally dyed. I'll include all of the information to the video where Eula talked about this year's Festive boxes. Unfortunately, you're no longer able to get them, but in case you're interested in potentially getting one in the future, this is my second year in a row getting one of her Festive boxes, and I was not disappointed. So with regard to this yarn combo and the pattern, I will say this: because the pattern was originally designed in einband held with a silk mohair, and iron band is a pretty thin fingering weight yarn. It's over 400 meters to 100 grams, because I think it comes in 50-gram balls, and I think each one is like 237 meters maybe. The Ova sock is much thicker. It's about 400 meters to 100 grams, if I recall correctly, where the iron band is almost 500 meters, if I recall correctly. Just keep that in mind if you use this combo. Personally, I think that you can use just the Ovis sock without holding it with a like a silk mohair double and still get a perfect gauge. So my sock is just a tiny bit large, and I did knit the 64-inch size. And so what I ended up doing was I used the recommended needle for the colorwork motif, because colorwork on small circumference, I tend to knit very tightly. So I did knit the colorwork motif on a US 1, and it's perfect. It's not, it's stretchy enough to go over my heel, which is really important because I have a very high arch. So if I'm not careful with my colorwork, it won't go over my heel. And then what I did was for the foot, I sized down to a US 0 for the foot, so that I got a little bit of a snugger fit. So these are a perfect fitting sock. They don't have any negative ease, maybe a tiny bit of negative ease. So these will be a house sock. They won't be putting in my shoe sock. Maybe I might be able to get them in my wellies. But also this just feels so luxurious that I don't know that I would want to put them in my wellies. My iron band with silk mohair socks I put in my wellies all the time, and they take abuse like no other. So if you ever need a natural non-superwash sock combo that is going to withstand tons of wear and tear, pairing iron band with a silk mohair is the way to go. But because this is my first time using Ovis sock, and just because they are a little bit larger, I don't know that I will be wearing these in my shoes. I think that these are just going to be some super comfy, cozy house socks, which I'm not mad about, because who couldn't use super comfy, cozy house socks? So that is that pattern. And I have one more work in progress to share with you for this month. Okay, I feel like I am talking really quickly, so hopefully it doesn't seem like that to you all. But I have another half-finished project, another finished sock, single sock. And this is just my vanilla sock recipe, and this is what they're looking like. And they're not blocked yet, so you can actually see that they're not really sitting nicely on the sock blocker yet. The heel is puckering here. But this is just my vanilla sock pattern. I cast on 64 stitches, and then depending on how I'm feeling, I just go with it. And I knit all of my vanilla socks using a US 1 a US 1 needle. And so for this particular pair, I do a 1x1, and all my vanilla socks, I do a 1x1 rib for 15 rounds. Then I do the leg for 60 rounds. I do my heel, which my preferred heel is a heel flap and gusset with a reinforced slip stitch heel. And then I do 50 rounds for the foot before I do every other round decrease for the toe until I get down to a total of 12 stitches, so 6 on each of my front and back needle before closing it up using the Kitchener stitch. So I am, just for reference, a size 37 foot. So that's about a US 6.5. So I do have smallish feet, but that is my recipe. And I follow that for all of my vanilla socks, even if I do like a flat rib or, you know, anything like that. If it's a vanilla sock or vanilla-ish sock pattern. That's kind of my go-to, is 60 rounds heel, 50 rounds toe, and that gives me a perfect fitting sock for my preference. It gives me about 7-inch leg, so I do like my legs to come up pretty high. And yeah. Now for these, the reason why I cast these on was because I wanted to practice knitting on small circumference needles. And so yeah, so I cast these on and I worked on these over New Year's Eve. So I actually finished these completely in one day. And for this one, I actually was inspired by Stephanie of Edible Thoughts Makes, because I know that she knits on small circumference needles, and I was just thinking about her as I was knitting these. So I decided to use the, oh my gosh, I am completely blanking on the name of the heel. It is the, let's look this up instead of trying to sit here and pretend like we know what we're talking about. It is the Shadow Wrap heel, and so I will link to the tutorial of the Denise of the EarthtonesGirl that I followed to do the heel, but I did a Shadow Wrap heel for my sock instead of my traditional slip stitch reinforced heel. And so right now I'm holding the second sock in this little Cavallini & Co. bag that I picked up a while ago at Barnes & Noble. Oh, actually, I think I picked this one up at Paper Source, but you can pick these up at Paper Source or Barnes & Noble. And yeah, so let me tell you about this yarn. This is yarn that I picked up when we were in Brussels for our trip last year, and it is Katia Danubio Sock Lovers. And so that is the label there. And so it is a 75% wool, 25% polyamide, so your regular kind of sock base. And the color is is just 300. It just has a number, it doesn't have a name. And so yeah, it's just, you know, kind of has this self-patterning situation. I bought 2 skeins of this one, so I got this color and then kind of like a peachy spring color. So I still have that one in stash. And so what I've done is I actually went ahead and started the cuff of the second sock. So let me actually do this so that the camera can focus. There we go. So I just started the cuff of the second sock so that it's ready to go for my commute this week. And so I've got ahead and you know, casted that on, and they are on the small circumference needles. It is not it's definitely not second nature for me to do small circumference needles, and I really wanted to practice doing some small circumference needle work, which is why I cast these on, because as a continental knitter, it's a bit more difficult to hold the small circumference needles because of the way that continental knitters tend to hold their right hand needle, so more so than English style knitter. So if you're an English style knitter, you tend to be a little bit more comfortable on small circumference needles because you're already used to holding the needle kind of on a more like a small grip, because you're constantly doing this, unless you're a flicker. But I've always been a thrower when I knit English. But as a continental knitter, I pretty much hold my entire needle. So the fact that your needle is about this big and your palm is this big, it's just really hard. So I'm just practicing on my grip and more so also keeping my hands loose enough that I can, that it doesn't like cause my hand to cramp up. And the reason why I wanted to start practicing on small circumference is because I do occasionally, you know, I do knit magic loop. I love DPNs. DPN is always going to be my preferred. I know that I'm weird, but I love DPNs. But I do have a little bit of a goal in 2024 to knit more socks, and my commute is going to get is going to be drastically different from what it is today. So I can't have the fiddliness of magic loop or DPNs if I want to knit on my commute. I need very small compact projects, and I need it to be very small compact needles. And so that is why I am practicing my small circumference needle knitting, or knitting with small circumference needles, I should say. So those are all of the whips that I have to share with you all. If you recall from last month's podcast, I do have another whip, which is my third version of Amy Sherr's Building Blocks drop. However, I have not made any progress on that one in the past month, so I didn't want to show you that project if I hadn't made any progress on it. So hopefully I'll have some progress to share with you in the next month. So what we'll go ahead is we will move on to my January knitting plans. And so for January, we will be moving, so I don't have any real crazy knitting plans. I'm hoping to finish the second sock of both of the socks that I'm currently working on, so the Yule socks as well as my vanilla socks. And then I am looking to finish my test knit for Inez of Their Knit of the citrine. And I do have one project that I will be casting on, which is in collaboration with Hobie yarn, so keep an eye on my Instagram for that. And so that is something that I'll be casting on later on in the month, but it's not going to be like something that I finish this month. So really, in terms of the goals for what I want to finish this month, I want to finish 2 socks, so the second of those 2 pairs, and I want to finish the actual sweater. And if I recall correctly, I technically only need to finish the body and 1 sleeve for my size, because I'm knitting the 8th size, but I do want to go ahead and try to finish the whole, the whole sweater whenever possible. So those are my plans for the month of January. And with that, I will share kind of my upcoming filming schedule. So for January, you will obviously have this podcast that you are watching if you are watching it in the month of January. And I will also be sharing one more video this month, which is going to be my 2024 goals video. And that is definitely going up because I've already filmed it. So it is just scheduled to go up after this one. So I'll be sharing my 2024 goals in that video and kind of how I sat down to work through setting my intentions for the year. And then in February, if you're a returning viewer, typically I release the podcast the first Sunday of every month. But because the first weekend of February we will be moving, the podcast episode will actually be released on the second Sunday of February. So you're going to get 2 videos in January as normal, and then the podcast for February will be the second weekend in February. So last but not least, I want to finish off with my numbers for 2023. So if you are a returning viewer, you know that for 2023, I technically had a goal to de-stash 23 grams of yarn in the year, which that quickly became apparent was not going to happen. So about halfway through the year, I updated my goal to really just be to end the year either at a net 0 or a negative of any sort. And so I want to update you on those numbers, and I did actually meet my goal for the year, so I'm really excited. So for December, I did actually have a few acquisitions with regard to like my festive acquisitions that you saw some of them already. And then I did place a Pearl Soho order when they had their Black Friday sale for 2 test knits that I plan to do early in the year. So I did have quite a bit of yarn coming in, and as I did last month, I'll put the numbers up here so you can see them. I had 3,598 yards of yarn come in, And with regard to my finished projects, so again, that's anything that I finished in the actual month. So that's going to be, you know, the swatch bag, the blanket, my pullover, and the woodland ripple blanket. So I am counting that as finished object numbers because I've just been counting that in sections. Sort of when I finished the first part, I counted that as a finished object, and then now the second part, I'm counting as a finished object. So in terms of total number of yards out, that's going to be 2,820 yards. And so that is a net positive into my stash of 778 yards, which isn't terrible considering the holidays and the large order that I placed. So for my 2023 total numbers, so this is my total for the entire year. So in terms of yarn in, and so this is counting any yarn that I've purchased as well as any yarn that I've destashed or donated. That is 37,547 yards. Total yarn out, so this is only yarn that has been worked up. It is not yarn that has been destashed or donated. That is 37,668 yards, which brings me to a total negative of 123 yards for the year. So I just made it by the skin of my teeth, but I did make it, so I'm really excited about that. And then last but not least, I wanted to sort of talk about the plan for the podcast in 2024. So the actual podcast episodes, so these episodes that you are watching, as I have alluded to in the past, and if you watch my goals video, which will be up in 2 weeks, you'll find out I am planning on having a no-buy year for yarn. So the acquisitions portion of the podcast will essentially be going away. And I think I might actually do that permanently, just because, you know, I never want for anyone to feel like, you know, the choices that they make or the choices that I make, or, you know, I'm kind of, you know, judging them, or, you know, and I know sometimes for myself, like, I love watching acquisitions portions, and sometimes there are times that I don't want to be tempted and I don't watch the acquisitions portions of people's podcasts. So I just think that it might be something that I keep out of the podcast permanently, but definitely in 2024, the acquisitions portion will not be in the podcast. And so I will be adding in 2 new segments to the podcast. So you'll still get your traditional kind of what I'm wearing, finished objects, works in progress, and of course I'll give you my numbers updates for the year. So we will continue to update you on how much yarn I'm using throughout the year. But I also intend on including a little vlog in each video, so I know that a lot of you all like those when I include them whenever I have time to, but for 2024 I'm going to make the commitment to include a vlog. And so those, for you who may not be aware, they tend to be about 2-3 minutes to about 5 minutes long, so not very long. So I'll include that in the video just so you can see what I'm up to in the month. It might just be, you know, clips of me knitting or baking, or, you know, setting up our new apartment, or, you know, if we go on hikes and things like that, just what I'm up to in the month, if you're interested in watching that. And then my second sort of little new portion, I'm sure it'll change over time, and I'm still kind of working through how that's going to look, but I essentially do want to have a portion of the podcast that's dedicated to using your stash. So it might be, you know, 1 month I highlight something in my stash that I plan to be using. I know that sometimes it's difficult once you have something in your stash, especially if you don't have plans for it, for, you know, sort of finding a pattern for it. So I'll talk, maybe 1 month I'll talk through how I'm doing that myself for an upcoming pattern. So kind of, you know, something that is just focused on using your stash and loving your stash, and maybe like how to find joy in your stash, things like that. So so 2 new sections of the videos will be added to sort of beef them up, so these still are, you know, that kind of 45-minute to an hour long content that you're used to seeing from me. So it'll be a short 3 to 5 minute vlog, as well as a sort of stash feature segment of the month. And so that, you know, that feature segment may change month to month, but it will always be related to my stash. And so that is what you can expect to see from me in 2024. Also, I will continue to put out sewing podcast episodes. And again, those won't be as often because I think that I found in 2023, you know, having them as their own dedicated episodes. I know some of you like to see them in the knitting podcast episodes, but the truth is, you know, there are people who don't want to see it, and then it actually hurts my numbers on my knitting episodes. So it's actually been a lot better to separate those out. So you will continue to see sewing dedicated podcasts from me, and I will always let you know in the knitting podcast episode if there will be a sewing podcast episode that month. And so they'll probably continue in that sort of same, you know, rhythm that you've seen so far, with one of those coming out maybe every 3 to 4 months, so about once a quarter. So that's kind of what you can expect to see from me in 2024. I hope that you've all had an amazing start to the new year and you had a great end to 2023. I know 2023 was extremely challenging, both for all of us as a society, but also, you know, everyone has their challenges, and our family, actually, we had quite a few challenges. So I'm really, really looking forward to 2024 and everything that I'm hoping it brings, at least the things that we have planned out, although you know what they say about making plans, right? So I hope that you are staying safe wherever you are, as always. And as always, if you enjoy this content, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and click that bell icon so you're notified every time I post a video. Please be sure to like and comment. It really helps me out. It really helps others that might be interested in this type of content find my channel. And of course, there are several links on how you can support the channel further in the description below. But until my next video, I hope that you are taking care of yourselves, your loved ones, and each other. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.